Art is a record of man's thoughts and emotions. Art is man-made and original. Art is not merely skilled execution, nor is it just for aesthetic purposes. Art is purposive. Art is expression. Art, throughout the years, has been an impactful medium for people to let their feelings, opinions, and ideas be known. The Philippines is no stranger to this. Art has been a constant presence in Philippine history, be it culturally, academically, or even politically. This art research project will examine art as a political act throughout selected periods in Philippine history. This research was conducted with a meta-analysis methodology through which we have analyzed the existing literature surrounding the topic in order to arrive at our conclusions.
Before we start, we must first define what is political art. Since the start of the 1820s, political art has been present as a beacon to raise awareness and express profound conviction. This notion was said to be spearheaded by Esteban Pichay Villanueva when he was tasked to create the Bazi Revolt. This artwork was authorized by the Spanish government to utilize as a series of propaganda art to discourage Filipinos to rebel. Political art is an effective vehicle to depict the past, present, and future of our nation via the government handling the country. There are actually three categories of political art: portrayal, promotion, and projection. First, portrayal may either be implicit or explicit, depicting society's struggle through paintings, films, music, literature, and more. On the other hand, promotion allows the artists to emphasize the message he or she wants to deliver. This is then secured since its depiction can only be interpreted but not manipulated by the opposing party. And lastly, projection is the art's whole story. It can be seen as a warning, serve as a call, or share a glimpse of what could have been or the aftermath of a certain event. With this not so subtle way of protesting, it encourages people to take part in activism to stand up for what they believe in and embody the changes they want to see.
The first era of political art that we shall discuss is the time of the Spanish occupation. When the Spaniards arrived in the Philippines in 1521, despite the existing language barriers between them and the native Filipinos, they were able to propagate the Catholic faith through using art and beautiful images. As a result, many Filipinos were converted to Catholicism, and religion became one of the Spaniards' greatest tools in colonizing the Philippines. Many works of art were aesthetically pleasing religious images which reinforced the hold and power of the Spaniards over the nation. One prominent example of religious art in the Spanish colonial period is Joseph Luciano Dan's Langit, Lupa at Impierno, made in 1850, showing the Holy Trinity, Mary the Mother of Christ, saints, the seven blessed sacraments, and a macabre depiction of hell. However, as the Spanish occupation continued, Filipinos found themselves facing oppression at the hands of the colonizers. Even the friars, who were the religious leaders, made use of their power to oppress the Filipinos. Approaching the late years of the Spanish occupation, which marked the beginning of the fight for independence, the Filipinos willed to break free from the oppression and discrimination that the Spaniards subjected them to. This resulted in the creation of several artworks revolving around the concept of reform and rebellion. Examples of these are Jose Rizal's literary works, Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. Through these two novels, Rizal expressed the importance of education and peaceful revolution through reform. Rizal even said in the novel El Filibusterismo, "What is the use of independence if the slaves of today will be the tyrants of tomorrow?" However, throughout history, the true points of his novels have often been misunderstood, and the books, be it back then or even to this day, are mistakenly hailed as advocating for rebellion and revolution. Rizal's works remain considered as one of the most influential contributors to the fight for Philippine independence. To conclude, art was a substantial part of the Spanish occupation, both in the process of beginning it and ending it.
The second era is the time of the American colonial period. The American colonial period started when the Treaty of Paris in 1898 had transferred the Philippines' sovereignty from Spain to the United States for $20 million. On November 4, 1901, the Sedition Law was passed. This law prevented Filipinos from expressing their feelings towards the US and Philippine government in any media, which banned Filipino playwrights from writing, printing, and publication of materials advocating Philippine independence and engaging in activities. Hence, the Filipinos resorted to political art to fight and rally for their independence. Under this period, two main themes emerged. First are seditious plays. These plays are intended to persuade other people to oppose their government. A well-known example is the Tanikalang Ginto by Juan Abad in 1902. Its hidden message is about loving one's country, which is embodied as a reminder of the Filipino people suffering in the hands of the Americans. Second, drama simbolico refers to allegorical dramas. Most of these plays were banned and their playwrights jailed because of their unmistakable tendency. These plays were accused of inciting people into open and armed resistance as well as conspiring together for secret organizations. One example of this is Kahapon, Ngayon at Bukas by Aurelio Tolentino in 1903, which talk about the triumph and tormentors of our Inang Bayan. Ultimately, most political artworks were censored by the US government, as they knew influences of political art to Filipinos would inculcate ideas of the independence of the Philippines.
The third era is none other than the Japanese occupation. On December 8, 1941, Japan invaded the Philippines, hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Few months later, in July 1942, the surrender of the American and Filipino soldiers resulted in the Death March. This started from Mariveles, Bataan to the city of San Fernando, Pampanga, which was around 100 kilometers, which led to the death of around 10,000 soldiers. On February of 1942, people of Central Luzon started the so-called Hukbo ng Bayan laban sa mga Hapon, o Huk Balahap, to mark their protests against the inhumane actions of the Japanese. During this time of the Japanese occupation, artistic activity was suspended, although there were still others who were able to do works. Some artworks were made to seem in support of the Japanese, although it shows more of a neutral side. In contrast, there were works as well which showed cruelty during the occupation. Examples of these include The Baguio Market by Crispin Lopez, 1943, which illustrates two Japanese soldiers interacting with vendors of Baguio City. Rape and Massacre in Ermita by Diosdado Lorenzo, 1947, contained two Japanese soldiers raping and murdering family members in a home in Ermita, which showed what often happens in different parts of the Philippines during this time. Lastly, Capas by Demetrio Diego, 1948, depicts the horrible condition that the arrested soldiers by the Japanese were in Camp O'Donnell, Capas, Tarlac. As most of these were made after the occupation, it serves as a reminder of the cruelty brought by the Japanese.
Following this, we have the era of martial law, and later, the EDSA People Power Revolution. Political art played a big role in the Marcos regime. Martial law was a time wherein Filipinos' political freedom was severely restricted, due to the fact that the citizens can easily be arrested for false charges of terrorism. It started from 1965 to 1969. Throughout these periods, many occurrences of human rights abuse took place, such as extrajudicial killings, torture, and incarceration, whose victims had one thing in common: activism. Due to the unjust situation, this was a time in which political art was widely proliferated. It became a form of communication between the people and the Marcos regime. It served as a political communication tool and a creative way of social protest. The Filipinos used artworks to show their grievances against the Marcos dictatorship, to express what the people feared, and to show the reality of the citizens in the society. Some Filipino artists were also arrested and tortured during this period for making political art. A dominant style and theme of political art in this time was social realism, in order to show a clear picture of the existing socio-political realities.
One of the examples of influential political art during this period was Comprador, painted in 1978 by Pablo Bain Santos. The artwork depicts politicians passing money amongst each other as they trample on the Filipino laborers. It is seen in the painting that the politicians and elites were laughing while the Filipinos struggled. This struggle is represented by bold, angular lines. Secondly, we have Orlando Castillo's Justice Under Martial Law, made in 1980. The artist Orlando Castillo was the founder of the Concerned Artists of the Philippines, an organization aiming for justice, nationalism, and democracy. The artwork expresses the abuses that occurred throughout the Marcos regime. Marcos militantly stands in the center, appearing as the star of the painting. He has a gavel and American flag in his arms, revealing his true intentions. Conversely, the monochrome background of the painting depicts the suffering of Filipinos under Marcos abuse. Lastly, in the form of literary art, we have Pete Lacaba's Prometheus Unbound. The poem takes its title from Percy Bysshe Shelley's four-act literary drama and seems to take its context from it as well. However, upon closer examination, it can be observed that the first letter of each line in the poem spells out the message Marcos, Hitler, Dictador, Tuta, a popular rally chant in the time of martial law. Additionally, the first line, Mars shall glow tonight, is a pun for martial law tonight. Due to the publishing of this poem in a magazine, Lacaba, the author, was imprisoned and tortured under the Marcos administration. Art played a significant role in the time of martial law. Art was used for the people to show the real side or the truth about what is happening in the society. Amidst the lack of political freedom, art was used as a tool for the people to be aware about the truth. It was this political awareness and sense of nationalism that aided Filipinos in ending the Marcos dictatorship through the EDSA People Power Revolution.
Also, elections in the Philippines are a big central theme of almost every political art. The history of election political art begins on September 16, 1935, when the Philippines held its first national elections, which led the two leading nationalist politicians, the outgoing Senate President Manuel L. Quezon and former Senate President pro tempore Sergio Osmeña, to join forces to form a powerhouse. They faced former President Emilio Aguinaldo and Raimundo Meliza, who ran under the National Socialist Party, and Bishop Gregorio Aglipay of the Philippine Independent Church, who re-established the Republican Party together with Norberto Nabong. As a result, Quezon won in all provinces, except the Cavite and Ilocos Norte, Aguinaldo and Aglipay bailiwicks respectively. On the other hand, Osmeña demolished his opponents and lost only in Cavite province, a feat unbeatable to this day. In the post-martial law period, As the election campaign continued, Marcos will campaign in selected key cities, while Aquino was able to campaign intensively and extensively, including moving to distant areas from the north of the Philippines to the south of the Philippines. The Aquino campaign ended a rally that is estimated to have 800,000 participants in Rizal Park and Rojas Boulevard, wearing yellow, creating a sea of yellow. This was the downfall of President Ferdinand E. Marcos and the accession of Corazon C. Aquino as president. Currently, in the 2016 presidential and vice presidential elections, Davao City Mayor Rodrigo Duterte of the Partido Demokratiko Pilipino Lakas ng Bayan, or the PDP Laban, won the presidential election against 5 other candidates, while Liberal Party leader Camarines Sur Leni Robredo won the Senate election against Senator Bongbong Marcos and 5 others, which is the closest margin since 1965.
Since the Philippines is a democratic country, elections keep a democratic country working since they give people the right to choose their own government. Through this, Filipinos are able to produce political art that may support, revoke, or expose the government handling the country. Some prominent examples include the Aquino signature brand. Since the 1978 elections, both Benigno Aquino Jr. and Corazon Aquino's political branding has consistently used the same shade of yellow with its signature monochrome ink style. This has been evident in their political art and strategies as it was deemed their official political color. Using this as a politically distinguishing factor, the colors yellow and black were the colors of protest during the Marcos regime opposition. After the assassination of Ninoy Aquino in 1983, the color yellow was prevalent as a sign of the peaceful People Power Revolution led by his spouse Cory Aquino. Hence, yellow ribbons, shirts, and merchandise were popularized during those times to symbolize the people's cries and prayers. Almost 3 decades later, the Liberal Party, spearheaded by their son Noynoy Aquino, has still stuck to its iconic yellow, allowing their supporters to be associated with yellow and labeled as Dilawans. During Noynoy Aquino's 2010 presidential campaign, he brought back the iconic color which became synonymous to their family. This allowed people to look back at the contributions his parents made for the peace of the country, making it an effective vehicle to depict the past and present in which he intends to secure the people's trust and votes due to their utang na loob. Second, Rodrigo Duterte's Iron Fist. Because of his effective political ads, supporters believe Duterte will eliminate violence and corruption and instill discipline with an iron hand. To further solidify his branding, he added his Iron Fist approach, signifying its need in the fight against drugs and corruption. Currently, Duterte is also linked with the political color red, which is usually associated with socialism and communism.
Lastly, we have the political art of the current era. Throughout 2020, several political issues have arisen in Filipino society. For example, there is the controversial anti-terrorism law that was signed by President Rodrigo Duterte this year. Amidst the COVID-19 lockdown, the law, which contains clauses that compromise the freedom of speech and expression of the Filipino people, has been a large social issue even prior to its signing. Given this, local artists rallied against the bill through the launch of their art. A 14-day campaign entitled Artists Fight Back was launched for artists to use their skills and platforms to raise awareness and encourage actions against the signing of the anti-terrorism bill. They started a petition which to date has garnered over 1,600 signatures. On the other hand, the concerned artists of the Philippines maximized the use of modern platforms for art, launching an Instagram filter protesting against the bill, saying, "I hate it when you call me terrorista," an appropriation of lyrics from the popular song Señorita. Though the signing of the bill was pushed through despite the citizens' protest, these endeavors have made significant impacts in making the issues and harms of the bill
known to the public, especially Filipino social media users. There is also the issue of the termination of ABS-CBN. On the 5th of May, the Philippines National Telecommunications Commission revoked the license of ABS-CBN to operate. Due to the revocation of the license of ABS-CBN, Filipinos are denied press freedom and essential information to the latest health crisis updates. Additionally, approximately 11,000 workers under ABS-CBN had lost their jobs. With this, Filipino artists are using artworks uploaded through technological platforms such as social media to voice out their frustrations and reach a larger audience despite the presence of the current community quarantine and lockdown. The concerned artists of the Philippines, through once again proliferating links to a petition alongside their art, were able to collect 1 million signatures petitioning the renewal of ABS-CBN franchise. Many Filipino artists posted art expressing their protest against ABS-CBN's shutdown, garnering thousands of likes, replies, and retweets.
Political art has been prevalent in different eras, with different meanings behind it as well. It was the Filipinos' way on how they can express their repressed feelings and emotions towards the oppression, challenges, and struggles in the Philippines. Did art truly play a decisive role in Philippine politics and history? While we cannot say that all Philippine political art was able to achieve the goals they advocated for, such as the misunderstanding of Rizal's message in El Filibusterismo, or the failure of modern protest art to prevent the signing of the anti-terrorism law, we also cannot say that these works had no political effect at all. Politics is highly dependent on the opinion of the parties involved, and through art, these parties, be it the government or the people, have made their views and perspectives known. Whether or not art is an efficient political medium is a story for another time. It is certain, however, that art has and will continue to influence the events of Philippine politics and history.